first, I thought I was dreaming. I had been sitting in my grandmother's old rocking chair, watching the first hint of dawn through the window. The farmhouse creaked the way it always did, that quiet symphony of old wood and winter wind. Then the phone rang again. "Grandma." The voice was trembling. It was Caleb, my grandson. "Please, don't wear your red coat today." I sat up straight. "Caleb, what's wrong? Why are you calling so early?" "Just promise me, okay? Don't wear it, you'll understand soon?" His voice cracked, full of something worse than panic. Fear. I looked at the coat rack by the door, where my bright red winter coat hung like a beacon. It had kept me safe on these country roads for years, but something in Caleb's tone reached deeper than reason. "All right, sweetheart," I said softly. "I won't wear it." When the call ended, I just sat there, the phone cooling against my palm. Outside, the darkness was thinning, and a few brave birds had begun to sing. I didn't know why my grandson sounded so afraid, but I knew one thing for sure today: I would leave the red coat hanging right where it was. By the time the sun finally climbed above the mountains, the house had settled into its usual morning rhythm, the sound of the heater clicking on, the kettle hissing, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Life on Willow Bend Farm followed the same pattern it had for decades, and that routine was the only comfort I had left since my husband passed away 7 years ago. At 63, I lived alone on the land Frank and I had built together. Every Tuesday and Friday, I caught the 9:15 bus into town, groceries, lunch at Betty's, dinner, maybe a visit to the library if time allowed. It was the kind of predictable day I used to love. But recently, that rhythm had been cracking. My daughter-in-law, Brianna, kept insisting I sell the farm and move into a senior community. "You'd have neighbors, Nora," she'd said at dinner last Sunday, "and real medical care if anything happens." My son Andrew just nodded along. I knew they meant well, or at least that's what I told myself. But the truth was, this land wasn't just dirt and fences. It was where my life still existed, where my husband's memory still breathed in the walls. Selling it would mean erasing everything we'd built, and I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. At 9 a.m., I buttoned my old brown jacket, the one with frayed cuffs and a missing button, and started down the gravel road toward the bus stop. The air was sharp and clean, the kind that makes your breath visible. The world felt ordinary again, almost peaceful, until I reached the end of the driveway. There was no bus. Instead, flashing red and blue lights painted the frosty morning. 4 police cars lined the roadside. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind, wrapped around the small wooden shelter where I always waited. For a moment I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Then Sheriff Ben Calder spotted me. "Mrs. Whitfield, stop right there," he called, raising his hand. "You can't come any closer." "What happened?" I asked, confused. "Is the bus delayed?" "There won't be a bus this morning," he said quietly. "A woman was found here about an hour ago." He hesitated before finishing. "She was wearing a red coat just like yours." The world tilted under my feet. I barely heard Sheriff Calder calling for a chair as my vision tunneled. Someone helped me sit inside his patrol car, and for a moment, all I could do was stare through the windshield at the yellow tape. Beyond it, crime scene investigators moved carefully around a white tarp lying on the ground. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. "Sheriff," I whispered, "my grandson called me this morning. He told me not to wear that coat." Calder's expression changed instantly. "Your grandson? When?" "At 5 a.m., he said, 'Don't wear your red coat today.'" Then the call ended. He pulled out a small notepad. "Can you repeat everything he said, word for word?" I did, every syllable trembling on my lips. Calder wrote quickly, then looked up. "Where's Caleb now?" "I don't know," he didn't say. I tried calling his phone again, straight to voicemail, 3 times. Nothing. Detective Serena Cho, a young woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, approached. "Mrs. Whitfield, we'll need to locate your grandson immediately," she said. "If he warned you about this, he might know who that woman was, or worse, who wanted to hurt you." By the time the police drove me home, the morning sun had turned harsh and cold. My mind kept replaying Caleb's trembling voice. How could he have known? Why hadn't he told me more? Inside the kitchen, the remains of Sunday dinner still sat on the counter, half a pie, a stack of brochures, and Brianna's neat handwriting on every page. Silver Pines Retirement Living, the cover read in bold blue letters. I remembered the conversation like it was happening again. "Mom, Andrew had said gently, cutting his roast beef. This farm is too much for you to manage. It's time to think about safety. Safety? I had laughed, though there was no humor in it. I've lived here 40 years without breaking a bone. Brianna smiled that polished realtor smile of hers. We're just trying to help, Nora. You'd have security, community, peace of mind? But behind her kindness was calculation. Her voice always softened when she wanted something. Now, sitting in that same kitchen, I looked at the stack of papers she'd left behind. Floor plans, financial projections, signatures, lines already marked. It wasn't help she wanted, it was control. And maybe, just maybe, this morning's tragedy had something to do with that. That afternoon, Sheriff Calder asked me to come down to the station. The small interview room smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Detective Serena Cho sat across from me, her pen tapping lightly against her notebook. Miss Whitfield, she began, we've identified the woman found at the bus stop. Her name was Paige Lawson. She worked at the county records office. I frowned. I don't know anyone by that name. Detective Cho exchanged a look with the sheriff. According to her phone records, she'd been in contact with your grandson several times over the past 2 weeks. My chest tightened. Caleb. No, that can't be right. He's studying engineering, working part-time at the hardware store. He doesn't even know anyone at county records. Serena slid a document across the table. Then how do you explain this? It was a property deed, my name at the top, my signature at the bottom. The farm transferred to Andrew and Brianna Whitfield. I stared at it, unable to breathe. That's impossible, I said. I never signed this. It was recorded 3 weeks ago, Serena replied softly. Officially filed and notarized. I gripped the table's edge. Somehow someone had stolen my home and used my name to do it. When I got home from the station, the house felt different, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. My gut told me something was off. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. Brianna was standing by my filing cabinet, her back turned, papers spread across the counter. What are you doing here? I asked. She spun around, startled but only for a second. Oh, Nora, I was just looking for some documents, insurance forms, medical records. The detective might need them. You have no right to go through my files, I said firmly. She smiled, that same smooth, rehearsed smile. You gave me a key years ago, remember? For emergencies? This isn't an emergency, I said, stepping closer. Unless you count fraud as one. Her expression hardened. I don't know what the police told you, but if there's a deed with your signature, it's legal. A notarized transfer is binding in Montana law, even if you don't remember signing it. How do you know that? I asked quietly. Brianna met my eyes, her tone icy. Because I looked it up. Maybe someone just saved you from making a terrible mistake. And for the first time I saw it clearly, she wasn't helping me, she was hunting me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt louder, heavier. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Meet me at the old mill at midnight. Come alone, they're watching you. My pulse quickened. It was signed Caleb. The words "come alone" chilled me, but the message ended with something only he would write. Remember strawberry summer, our secret code. The summer he was 7, when we'd planted strawberries behind the barn and eaten too many to count. That phrase meant trust me. By 11:30 I pulled on my brown jacket and took the truck keys from the hook. The night was moonless, clouds thick and low. As I backed out of the driveway, headlights flared in the distance, another car, idling near the road. It followed me for miles, keeping its distance but never turning away. Someone was tailing me. I turned onto an old logging road Frank and I used to take when we went hunting. My headlights off, I bounced over ruts and stones until the main road disappeared behind me. When I reached the Clearwater Mill, the air was colder, thick with the sound of rushing water. And there, in the faint glow of my flashlight, stood Caleb alone, waiting. Grandma, Caleb said as I stepped into the crumbling mill, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. He looked exhausted, eyes red, hands shaking. Dust swirled in the beam of my flashlight. I crossed the floor and pulled him into a hug. Tell me what's going on, I whispered. He took a shaky breath. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was helping her, Paige Lawson. I thought she was trying to protect you. I froze. Protect me? How? She said she worked at county records and knew how to flag property deeds to keep developers from taking your land. She said she could make it untouchable. He ran a hand through his hair. But she lied. She was working with Brianna. My stomach dropped. Brianna hired her months ago. Everything, the flirting, the friendship, it was all part of the plan. Paige used me to get information about the farm. She said if she had your property records, she could make sure no one forged anything. But she was the one doing it. I felt cold from the inside out. Then why is she dead? Caleb swallowed hard. Because she got greedy. She wanted more money. She told Brianna she had proof of everything, the forged signature, the payments, the fake contracts. And that's when she disappeared. A sound echoed from outside, the crunch of gravel under tires. Caleb stiffened. She found us, he whispered. Before I could ask who, a blinding light cut through the broken windows. Headlights. A car door slammed. Then another. Stay behind me, I said, grabbing his arm. The front door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside, his badge glinting in the flashlight beam. Deputy Tyler Briggs, Sheriff Calder's second in command. Evening, Mrs. Whitfield, he said, voice too calm. We've been looking for you. Behind him, Brianna appeared, dressed in black, her hair pulled tight. The polished realtor was gone. What stood before me was colder, sharper. Let's not make this difficult, she said. We just need what Paige gave you. I don't have anything, I lied. Brianna sighed. You're too honest to lie. Well, hand over the flash drive, sign a voluntary transfer of ownership, and we can all go home safely. Or what? I asked. Tyler's smile didn't reach his eyes. Or your truck goes off the bridge on the way back. Caleb tensed beside me, but I lifted my hand slightly. Don't move. I'd been a teacher for 40 years. I knew a bluff when I saw one. But this time the stakes were deadly real. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. While they talked, I took a slow step back toward the workbench where I had set down my purse. Inside it, a small voice recorder blinked red. I'd turned it on the moment I left the house. Brianna, I said, keeping my tone steady, you think I'd hand over my life's work to you? After everything you've done? She crossed her arms. What I've done is try to save this family from your stubborn pride. Save it? I said. By stealing it? Her eyes narrowed. You wouldn't understand business. That's when the sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights spilled through the shattered windows. Tyler cursed and reached for his gun, but the command came sharp. Drop it, Sheriff Calder's voice. Within seconds, the mill filled with officers. Brianna froze, her face pale in the flashing lights. As they cuffed her and Tyler both, Sheriff Calder glanced at me. We heard everything, Nora. You recorded long enough for us to trace the signal. You just saved yourself and probably a few others too. I exhaled, my knees weak. For the first time that day, I let myself breathe. The following week felt like waking up from a nightmare only to realize the storm wasn't over yet. The sheriff's office was crawling with investigators, journalists, and lawyers. Each day, a new detail surfaced, each worse than the last. It turned out Paige Lawson hadn't been the only victim. There were others. Elderly homeowners across the county, pressured into signing over their land through fake retirement trusts and investment partnerships. 4 of them had died within months of the transfers: car crashes, house fires, sudden falls. Brianna's company, Ridgeview Realty, was listed in every transaction, and behind Ridgeview stood a web of shell companies, all pointing to one name, Northstar Development. Caleb sat beside me in the sheriff's office, staring at the wall of names. How could she do this? He whispered. Because people like her don't see land, I said quietly. They see profit. Sheriff Calder nodded. We've suspected Northstar for years, but this is the first solid lead. With Brianna and Tyler in custody, we can start unraveling it. Still, one question gnawed at me. Who else had known? Who had notarized my fake signature? The sheriff folded his arms. Someone with authority, someone inside the courthouse. The hunt, it seemed, was far from over. 2 days later, I received a letter from a law firm in Helena. The envelope was thick, expensive, and heavy with threat. Inside was a notice of civil action. Brianna Whitfield v. Nora Whitfield. The claim accused me of defamation, elder confusion, and obstruction of justice. They were asking the court to declare me mentally unfit to manage my affairs. I stared at the words until they blurred. It was a legal trap, one last weapon Brianna had set in motion before her arrest. If the petition succeeded, I could lose guardianship of my own property. Sheriff Calder dropped by that afternoon, his hat in hand. Her attorney's trying to freeze your assets. Stall tactic, he said. They're betting you'll panic. I'm not panicking, I replied, though my voice trembled. He hesitated. We're still decrypting that flash drive Caleb found. It's locked with military-grade encryption. Could take weeks? Weeks. I didn't have weeks. I walked to the window and looked out over the frozen fields. My breath fogged the glass. If Brianna thought she could silence me through paperwork, she didn't know who she was dealing with. I'd taught generations of teenagers how to find the truth in a text. I could find it here too. That night, I couldn't shake Sheriff Calder's words. Someone inside the courthouse. It echoed in my head as I paced the living room. The wind outside rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. If Brianna had orchestrated this much, she hadn't done it alone. She didn't have the patience or the brains for legal detail. Someone had taught her how to move quietly, how to use the system against people like me. I sat at the table with Caleb and spread out every document we had, the deed, the transaction history, Paige's phone records, and the USB drive we couldn't open. Grandma, Caleb said, Paige once told me she first met Brianna at a property listing an old ranch near Red Lodge. She said that's where their partnership started. My pulse quickened. Red Lodge, that was her first listing under Ridgeview Realty. Caleb nodded. If we want proof, maybe we should start there. I smiled faintly. You think like a hunter now? He grinned weakly. You taught me well. Then let's hunt, I said, standing. But we won't do it on their terms. We'll think like they do, anticipate, misdirect, and strike when they least expect it. The teacher in me was gone. The survivor had taken her place. We drove through the night toward Red Lodge, the headlights carving tunnels of light through falling snow. The old ranch stood at the edge of a frozen meadow, its roof half collapsed, windows boarded up. The sign out front, Ridgeview property, hung crooked, creaking in the wind. This place gives me the creeps, Caleb muttered. It's where it started, I said, and where it's going to end. We circled the property, checking for lights or movement. Nothing. The main house had burned years ago, but the stables still stood. We stepped inside, our boots crunching on hay and ice. Dust floated through the beam of my flashlight. Grandma, over here. Caleb pointed to a stall door. Carved into the wood, half hidden under grime, was the name Starlight Page, childhood horse. I ran my fingers over the carving, then noticed a loose plank just below it. Together we pried it open. Inside was a small metal box wrapped in plastic. My hands shook as I opened it. A flash drive, and a letter. The paper was water-stained, but I could still read the words. If anything happens to me, the password is Starlight9997. Tell Nora Whitfield I'm sorry. I exhaled sharply. Paige hadn't been a villain. She'd been a warning. Before we could even start the truck, headlights appeared at the end of the dirt road, 3 vehicles, closing fast. Grandma, Caleb said, panic rising, they found us. I shoved the flash drive and letter into my jacket pocket. Get in the truck, lock the doors. Brianna stepped out of the lead SUV, flanked by 2 large men in dark coats. Even from a distance, her confidence radiated. She called out, You can't hide forever, Nora. Hand over what's mine, and I'll make sure you're not charged for trespassing. I stepped forward into the beam of her headlights. You've taken enough, Brianna. I think it's time you answered some questions. She laughed. You think anyone will believe a senile old woman over me? That's adorable. I lifted my phone and smiled. They don't have to believe me. They're watching it. Her expression faltered. I started a live stream 10 minutes ago, I said. Sheriff Calder, the state police, and 3 local newsrooms all have the link. If I lose connection, Caleb uploads everything to the cloud, including Paige's letter. The color drained from her face. From behind her, sirens wailed, dozens of them. Red and blue lights flooded the meadow. Brianna spun toward her SUV, but it was too late. Officers swarmed. As she was led away, she glared at me. You think you've won? I met her eyes. No, I said calmly. I just stopped losing. The following morning, the headlines spread across every local paper. Real estate fraud ring exposed, local woman's evidence leads to arrests. The livestream footage had gone viral overnight. It showed everything: Brianna's threats, Tyler's intimidation, even the moment the police arrived. There was no denying the truth anymore. The competency hearing that Brianna's lawyer had scheduled was dismissed immediately. The forged deed, the false power of attorney voided. My ownership of Willow Bend Farm was fully restored. Sheriff Calder visited later that afternoon, exhaustion written all over his face. "You did it, Nora," he said. "We've got enough to take down North Star's top executives. They'll be facing federal charges." I smiled faintly. It wasn't just me. Paige tried to warn us and Caleb refused to give up. He tipped his hat. "Still, you gave us the push we needed. You turned a con into a confession." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet. For the first time in months, I felt something that had been missing since the day Frank died. Peace. Not the fragile kind, but the kind you earn by standing your ground and refusing to be erased. In the weeks that followed, the farmhouse slowly came back to life. The yellow tape was gone, the fences repaired, and the smell of coffee once again filled the kitchen every morning. It felt like the land itself was finally breathing again. Andrew came by one afternoon, looking older than I remembered. He stood on the porch for a long time before knocking. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know how to apologize for everything." I looked at him for a moment, seeing both the little boy who used to chase fireflies and the man who'd chosen the wrong partner. "You don't need to apologize," I said, "just learn from it." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I already filed for divorce. I should have seen who she really was." Inside, Caleb was fixing the old radio by the window. He'd taken a break from school, spending his days helping mend fences and replanting the strawberry patch behind the barn. "Grandma," he said one morning, brushing dirt off his hands, "do you think things will ever go back to normal?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart, but maybe that's a good thing." The red coat still hung by the door. I hadn't touched it since that day. Now it wasn't a warning anymore, it was a reminder of the day everything changed, and we found the strength to start over. 2 months later, I sat in the front row of the courtroom, watching Brianna Weston walk in wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of her usual tailored suits. Her hair was tied back, her confidence stripped away. The judge read out the charges: multiple counts of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and 2 counts of murder in connection with past property owners. Her attorney tried to argue she'd been manipulated by others in the company, but the evidence, the recordings, the documents from Paige's drive, the live stream was irrefutable. When the verdict was read guilty on all charges, a quiet gasp rippled through the room. Brianna didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, as if she could still will the world to bend to her. Afterward, Sheriff Calder approached. "She's looking at life without parole, and thanks to you, 6 other families will finally get justice." I nodded. "It's not about revenge," I said softly. "It's about making sure she never hurts anyone again." He smiled. "You did more than that, Nora. You reminded everyone that age doesn't mean weakness, it means experience." As I stepped out of the courthouse, the winter sun broke through the clouds. It felt like Montana itself was exhaling. Justice had come, not in fury, but in truth, and that was enough. Spring returned to Willow Bend Farm in shades of green and gold. The fields thawed, the river softened, and life began again. Caleb and I spent the mornings in the garden, rebuilding the strawberry patch together. We didn't talk much about Brianna or the trial anymore. The past had already spoken for itself. Instead, we talked about small things: the soil, the weather, the way the robins always returned before the snow was fully gone. One afternoon, as we rested by the fence, Caleb asked, "Grandma, do you ever wish you'd left when Dad and Brianna wanted you to?" I looked out across the fields, the same land Frank and I had worked for 40 years. "No," I said. "This place isn't just dirt and fences, it's memory. It's everything we built, everything worth fighting for." He smiled softly. "I think Grandpa would have been proud of you." "I hope so," I said, my eyes misting. "But what matters is that you're here now, that we're still standing." That evening, I hung my red coat back on the hook by the door, not as a symbol of fear, but of survival. It reminded me that sometimes the difference between losing everything and saving it all is one instinct, one warning, one act of courage. To anyone listening, I'll tell you this. Never underestimate a woman who's lived long enough to know the cost of silence and